You wake up tired, but not physically tired. It's a different kind of exhaustion. You're doing what you're supposed to do, working, improving, moving forward, but somewhere in the background, a quiet question keeps whispering, "Is this really my life?" And the more you try to answer it, the less certain you feel. Why does progress feel so unstable? Why does freedom feel so overwhelming? And why, in the decade where you're building your future, do you sometimes feel like you're losing yourself? 2. Problem Deep Dive. In your 20s and 30s, life expands quickly. More options, more paths, more identities you could become. Career shifts, relationships forming and dissolving, cities changing, beliefs evolving. From the outside, it looks like growth. From the inside, it often feels like fragmentation. You try on different versions of yourself. The ambitious version, the minimalist version, the entrepreneur, the creative, the stable professional. Each one feels right for a while. Then doubt creeps in. You scroll social media and see someone your age who seems certain about their career, their relationship, their purpose, and your brain quietly interprets their certainty as evidence that you are behind. That self-comparison isn't random. It's rooted in social comparison theory, first articulated by Leon Festinger. Your brain constantly evaluates itself by comparing to others, not to feel bad, but to locate itself in the social hierarchy. In evolutionary terms, clarity meant safety, but modern life offers too many reference points. So instead of clarity, you get cognitive overload. And that overload slowly turns into identity confusion. You start asking questions like, am I choosing this because I want it or because I'm afraid not to? Is this ambition or insecurity? Do I even know who I am without achievement? These questions don't just affect your career, they affect relationships. You hesitate to commit, not because you're incapable of love, but because commitment feels like closing other doors. You delay decisions. You overthink simple choices. You feel pressure to optimize your life, as if identity is a product that must be engineered. Psychologists call this identity exploration, and during emerging adulthood, it peaks. But here's the part most people don't understand. The discomfort isn't a malfunction. It's a developmental phase colliding with a culture of infinite options. And your brain was never designed for infinite options. So what is actually happening inside you? 3. Reframe. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not uniquely lost. You are experiencing what developmental psychologist Erik Erikson described as an identity stage, a period where the core task of your life is to integrate who you've been with who you're becoming. An identity crisis is not a collapse, it's a restructuring. Think of it like renovating a house while still living in it. Walls are being moved, old rooms are being repurposed, some doors are closing, and for a while, everything feels unfinished. That discomfort is not proof you're failing, it's proof you're evolving. But evolution inside the brain has a cost, and to understand the cost, you need to understand the mechanism. 4. Psychological mechanism. Your brain wants coherence. In cognitive science, coherence means a consistent story about who you are. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning and long-term thinking, constantly builds narratives. I'm the responsible one. I'm the creative one. I'm the successful one. These narratives reduce uncertainty. But in your 20s and 30s, reality keeps contradicting your story. You change jobs. You fail at something you thought defined you. You outgrow friendships. You question beliefs you inherited. Each contradiction creates cognitive dissonance, a tension between your self-story and new evidence. Your brain hates that tension, so it tries to resolve it quickly, either by clinging harder to old identities or by impulsively adopting new ones. Here's a simple mental model. Imagine your identity as a GPS system. When you're younger, the route is preloaded by family, culture, school. But in adulthood, the GPS loses signal. Now it must recalculate. Recalculating requires uncertainty, and uncertainty activates the brain's threat system, particularly the amygdala. To your nervous system, uncertainty feels like danger, even when it's existential. That's why identity crises feel anxious. It's not weakness, it's neurobiology. But if your brain is wired to avoid uncertainty, how do you build a stable identity in a world that constantly shifts? 5. Practical framework. Not by eliminating uncertainty, but by changing your relationship to it. Here are 5 principles grounded in psychology. 1. Separate identity from outcome. What to do? Stop describing yourself in terms of results. Shift from "I am successful" to "I value growth." Why it works? Research in self-determination theory shows that intrinsic values create more stable motivation than outcome-based identities. When identity is tied to results, every setback threatens your sense of self. Real-life example. Instead of saying, "I'm a failure because I didn't get promoted," you reframe to, "I value learning. This is data." The brain experiences less threat because your core self isn't at risk. 2. Limit identity comparison. What to do? Reduce passive social media during periods of self-doubt. Why it works? Your brain uses available data to define norms. Constant exposure to curated success distorts perceived reality, amplifying upward comparison. This overstimulates reward circuits and increases dissatisfaction. Real-life example. You notice you feel lost after scrolling career content. You replace 30 minutes of scrolling with journaling about your own progress. The brain shifts from external comparison to internal reflection. 3. Use small experiments instead of big decisions. What to do? Test identities in low-risk ways. Why it works? Behavioral psychology shows that action reduces rumination. Small experiments lower the amygdala's threat response because the cost of failure is minimal. Real-life example. Instead of quitting your job to find purpose, you take a weekend course in something you're curious about. The brain gathers real data instead of hypothetical fear. 4. Build narrative coherence. What to do? Write your life story in chapters. Past chapter, current chapter, next possible chapter. Why it works? Narrative psychology suggests that meaning emerges from structured storytelling. When experiences are integrated into a coherent narrative, the prefrontal cortex reduces uncertainty. Real-life example. You stop seeing your career change as inconsistency. You frame it as exploration leading toward clarity. The story becomes developmental, not chaotic. 5. Anchor to values, not roles. What to do? Define 3 core values that remain stable across contexts: curiosity, integrity, connection. Why it works? Roles change, values endure. Values-based identity is neurologically safer because it's internally regulated, not externally validated. Real-life example. Even if you change careers, your commitment to curiosity remains. That continuity stabilizes your sense of self. 6. Integration. Your identity is not a fixed object. It's a dynamic system, like a river. The water changes constantly, but the direction remains shaped by deeper terrain. Your terrain is your values. Your experiments are the flow. Your narrative is the map you draw afterward. An identity crisis is not a sign that the river is broken. It's a sign that it's carving a new path. And carving takes friction. But friction is how depth is formed. 7. Quiet, empowering close. One day, you will look back at this period and realize it wasn't confusion, it was construction. You weren't lost, you were recalibrating. The discomfort you feel now is the sound of your internal GPS learning